Hi, boys and girls. It's time for another story. Our story today is called The Promise and the Ski Run. Well, Sandy, one of the best things that he liked to do was to ski. That was his favorite sport, and if he couldn't be doing it himself, he loved watching other people do it. But today he was rather sad. The skis that he was skiing on were beautiful skis, and Mrs. Andrews had given him those for last Christmas as a gift. And he had made a promise to her. He had said, I will come on Washington's birthday, because that's a holiday for me, and I will visit you then. That was 2 months ago. 2 months before he even realized that Sugarloaf Mountain, his hometown, had been chosen for the races, the skiing races. And wouldn't you know it, it was scheduled for Washington's birthday, the day that he promised Mrs. Andrews he'd come see her. Well, when he got up, he knew what his decision was. He'd made a promise and he was going to keep it. So he went out and he got his skis on and he looked at the runs ahead of him. Mrs. Andrews lived on the other side of the mountain. There were 2 ways he could go. Well, actually only one. Number one, he wasn't that good of a skier. And secondly, Devil's Run. My, if you could go down Devil's Run, you could get to Mrs. Andrews' place in a half an hour. But he was going to have to go on what used to be the old wagon road. And it would take him 4 hours of good, hard skiing to get there. But you know, the Devil's Run, nobody had ever done the Devil's Run except for one man in town. And he'd broken his leg. He knew that it wasn't safe. Devil's Run was very dangerous. It was full of cliffs and valleys and gulches and rocks, and it was a fabulous ski run. But nobody could do it. Well, he decided that he needed to get going, and just then he heard somebody calling, Sandy, Sandy, where are you going? And he turned around and there was Dr. Bennett. Dr. Bennett was their village doctor. And he said, I'm going to see a friend. And Dr. Bennett looked at him and he said, today, when the races start in half an hour? That doesn't make sense. And Sandy said, but I promised. I gave my word. And Dr. Bennett said, oh, okay, I understand. You can't break your word. No, you can't. I know. He said, that's really too bad. Because, you know, Dash Martin, my friend from college, was going to be here today. And he's the best skier. Now, Dr. Bennett, Sandy knew, was a really good skier himself. But if this Dash Martin was anything like Dr. Bennett said he was, it would be a fabulous thing to see him. And Sandy was almost tempted. But then he saw in his mind a picture of little old Mrs. Andrews. And when he had told her that he would come, she had said, ah, I know. If you say you'll come, you'll be here. You always keep your word. I'll see you then. And he remembered that conversation and he thought, nope, I have to be there. And he turned to Dr. Bennett and he said, goodbye, enjoy the races. Well, as he was heading toward the road, he saw the workers out there putting up the little red flags for the different races. And people were starting to gather because it was going to happen within a half an hour. And Sandy thought, I need to get out of here. He started up that road. Well, it wasn't very long till the road became a good downhill. And he had his ski poles and he shoved off. And before he knew it, he was flying at top speed through that unbroken snow, and snow was flying every which way. And he was so busy concentrating on what he was doing that he didn't even have time to think about what he was missing. Well, it didn't take him too long to get down the other side of the mountain. But where Mrs. Andrews lived was up the side of another mountain. But it wasn't downhill now. And I don't know if any of you have ever climbed hills or the sides of mountains with skis on, but that's not an easy feat. Walking up the side of a mountain, your skis going sideways up. It did take him almost 4 hours to get from home to Mrs. Andrews. When he got there, he was all out of breath. And he looked around and he saw the little house and he saw the woodshed. But then something bothered him. As he was looking, he noticed that there was no footprints coming in and out of the house. There was no smoke coming out of the chimney. Something wasn't right. He quickly unclamped the clamps on his skis, and he ran up those few steps up onto the porch, and he knocked. Mrs. Andrews, I'm here like I promised. But it was way too quiet. There was no answer. He grabbed at the door and opened it. And when he got inside, it was almost as cold inside as it was outside. Mrs. Andrews! Still there was no answer. Then he started to look around. And there lay Mrs. Andrews on the couch. Her head was on the pillow. But she wasn't moving. He couldn't even tell if she was breathing. What if she was dead? But then as he was watching her, her eyes slowly came open and she said, "You came. I knew you would come." And then her head fell back on the pillow again. And he got over close to her and he said, "Are you all right?" She looked kind of gray. She was very cold. She tried to open her eyes again, but it was a major effort for her. It was like she was so weak that she couldn't hardly talk. Finally, she opened her mouth and she said, "Sandy, go get Dr. Bennett." "Okay, I will. I'll go get Dr. Bennett." But then he thought, what should I do before I go? What shall I do? Well, then his mind kicked into action. He raced out the front door and he went to the woodshed. He had to build a fire. But the door was frozen shut. And he pulled and he banged and he kicked until he broke the little ice along the bottom edge, and he was able to get a whole armload of wood. He ran back into the house and he quickly built a fire. She was asleep, or she appeared to be. He said, "I'm going for Dr. Bennett now." But before he went, he grabbed some blankets and put over her. And she kind of just barely nodded her head. But when he told her he was going, she didn't say anything. He knew he needed to hurry, and he needed to hurry fast. He started back the way he came, down that mountainside that he just climbed up so laboriously to get to her house, across that little bit of valley, down to the next mountain. He climbed. Then he started down the other side, down that wagon road that he had come up 3 hours ago, maybe. He'd never skied so fast in his life. He just flew down. Those poles were like flashes of light as he went flying down that mountainside. When he got close to the bottom, he looked around and the people were all gone. And then he thought, well, of course, the race is over. Everybody's gone home. But then, kind of over in the distance, he saw a man skiing along. And Sandy yelled out to him and he said, "Do you know where Dr. Bennett is? I need Dr. Bennett." Well, the man turned around and he pushed off with his ski poles and he quickly skied right in front of Sandy. And he said, "You need Dr. Bennett? He's not here. He got called away to an accident." And Sandy said, "Oh no." And then he proceeded to tell this man that he'd never seen before. He told him all about Mrs. Andrews and how she was sick. And the man stopped him and he said, "I'm a doctor. What's the fastest way to get to her?" And Sandy said, "Devil's Run. But nobody can go down that. It's too hard and too steep. It'd take you a half an hour on Devil's Run, but you better go up the old wagon road. It'll take you a lot longer, but you'll get there safely then." And the man turned around and he said, "Devil's Run it is then." And before Sandy could even say any more, he turned around, the man dead, that doctor, and he looked at him and he said, "When I get to the bottom of the mountain, which way do I turn?" Sandy said, "You turn left." And while Sandy stood there, he had never seen anybody so swiftly and smoothly move from one place to the other place, to the top of that mountain crest. And as Sandy watched, he shot off the top of Devil's Run. He hit the first cliff and he flew into the air and landed 20 feet below. And Sandy couldn't see him anymore. And then he went on and up, and Sandy could see him going off another embankment in the air. And then Sandy couldn't see him anymore. And he thought, whoever that is really can ski. Well, the man had said to him when he told him he was a doctor, he'd said to him, "Go to Dr. Bennett's house when I leave and wait for Dr. Bennett to come back from his emergency and send him in the car." So as soon as Sandy couldn't see that skier anymore, his mind was just whirling with how fabulous that guy could ski. He literally had flown off those cliffs into midair and landed again, still upright, and headed down the hill. Well, was that ever something for Sandy to think about? So he quickly got his skis, going, and down the rest of that hill he went, all the way to Dr. Bennett's house. And it was a ways to Dr. Bennett's house. When he got there, Dr. Bennett was just driving in the driveway, and Sandy scooted over on his skis, and Dr. Bennett looked at him, and Sandy said, "It's Mrs. Andrews. She's really sick." And some guy that said he was a doctor went skiing down Devil's Run. And he said, as soon as you came, to get in your car and come and meet him there. Well, even before Sandy could really stop talking, Dr. Bennett was back in his car, backing out of the driveway and heading off to the road that led to the other side of the mountain. All of a sudden, Sandy was really, really tired. He had been skiing most of the day, for hours. He'd never skied so long. But he started heading back toward home. When he got home, he'd only been there a little while when his friend Dick came running in the door, and he said, "Oh, Sandy, you don't know what you missed. You should have seen Dash Martin. He won all the races. I have never seen anybody that could ski like he was skiing. It was absolutely wonderful." And Sandy said, "Well, I wished I could have seen it all, but I had to keep my word." And Dick was telling him all about everything that was going on. And pretty soon, it was late afternoon, it was supper time, and Dick was thinking about maybe it was time for him to go home. And Sandy looked out the window, and he saw Dr. Bennett's car coming up their driveway, and he ran out. He had to know what had happened to Mrs. Andrews. Was she all right? So he ran to the door of the car almost before Dr. Bennett could stop. Dr. Bennett opened the door and he smiled at Sandy. He said, "She's going to be all right." Oh, Sandy was so glad. And Dr. Bennett said, "You know, had you not gone to see her, she would have died. And I'm not kidding. She was almost gone by the time Dash Martin got there." Dash Martin? That doctor was Dash Martin? Yes, Dr. Bennett said. "Didn't you know? We went to school together to be doctors. He's the most fabulous skier around." Well, before Dr. Bennett could even finish what he was saying, Sandy turned around and he rushed back up their porch. He ran in the front door. Dick, I did get to see him. I did get to see Dash Martin. I saw him ski down Devil's Run. And nobody else saw him but me." You must always keep your word. If you make a promise, you need to keep it. If Sandy hadn't kept his promise, Mrs. Andrews would have probably died. Keeping promises are what Jesus does best. And he's made a promise to us that he's going to come again. And we hope that soon. And just like Sandy kept his promise and always kept his word, Jesus never makes a promise that he hasn't kept. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.